spent in a miserable way.
U.S. News: Trump aims for a very big deal with China ahead of March the 1st. D3adline Politics. Still, Trump said he was prepared to enact new sanctions, and increase existing ones, if a deal is struck. And he suggested it, asked in the Oval Office, where he was meeting with China's top negotiator, whether a deal was possible. Trump said he was sure. He said the teams had made tremendous. Still, he said those steps alone will suffice. In the Oval Office, Trump ordered a letter read aloud from Chinese President Xi Jinping, in which the leader expressed the hope both sides would meet halfway in their trade talks. Xi said in the letter that he cherished his working and personal relationship with Trump, sending Lunar New Year greetings to the Trump family and his wishes for a happy. The remarks came as trade talks entered their second day in Washington. U.S. officials. Earlier Thursday, the president tweeted that the trade talks were progressing well, but said a final agreement would come only after he meets again with his Chinese counterpart. No. Trump added on Twitter that Trump insisted in remarks from the Oval Office that he will accept only a comprehensive agreement, and suggested it may take longer than a month to finalize. In a White House statement, however, the March the 1st deadline was reinforced. United. The president is facing a cascade of self-imposed deadlines over the coming months on major agenda items, starting with before the next funding lapse on February the 15th. Trump has made resetting the U.S. relationship with China a centerpiece of his presidency, pulling out of a planned multilateral trade deal drawn up by the Obama administration and launching a trade war last year that has contributed to an economic slowdown in China and jitters in the U.S. Trump called for a 90-day negotiation, and agreed to delay a radical hike in tariffs on billions in Chinese goods originally slated to take effect on January the 1st. Negotiations proceeded despite the partial federal government shutdown, with American negotiators flying to Beijing in early January. In a statement posted to Chinese state-owned Xinhua news agency Tuesday, Beijing's negotiators said they had agreed to vigorously. The Chinese statement said that both sides had agreed to a timetable and roadmap for future talks.
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park,